I think we can get started or start to get started. I am Desiree Brown. I'm Senior Manager of Communications here at the Tory Burch Foundation. As I'm sure all of you know, this is our small business webinar series. We are so excited to offer another selection this week. We are going to be talking about making your best minimum viable product. And so to do that, I am so excited to have Daesang Aberdeen here to talk to us all. Daesang is an innovation, product, and new venture creation leader, consultant, and creator. She translates big ideas into tactical implementation to launch and scale products. She takes a multidisciplinary approach, incorporating her knowledge across strategy, product, project management, and finance. So we have someone who is super knowledgeable here, who can help you get a new idea or product up and running quickly and at a low cost with some creativity. So after Daesang goes through her presentation, we are going to have time for Q&A. And so we ask that you all use the Q&A box for excuse me, for questions directly to our speaker, and that any introductions or response to the content go in the chat. And then after that, after today's session, please watch your inboxes for the replay link and a post-webinar survey. This helps us keep creating content for you. And so with all of that out of the way, I'm going to turn it over to Daesang.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Desiree. I'm so glad to be here today with all of you. So good morning, good afternoon, depending on your time zone and where you're tuning in from. I'm really excited about this topic, and I know it seems a lot of you are as well. And so I really can't wait to dive in. There are a couple of things I really want us to focus on and leave here with today. So 3 of those specifically are making sure we understand what a minimum viable product is, right? Defining that MVP. And especially in this context, why is this useful for small businesses? And then lastly, I want to just get a little more tactical and talk through, what it takes and how do you actually develop the MVP. So really excited to jump right in. So let me go ahead and share my screen, and we'll jump right in. We'll be keeping an eye out for questions as they come up, and we'll answer those at the bottom of the session. So the presentation should be up now. And as I mentioned, these are the agenda items I want to walk through with all of you today. So we are going to start right away. So let's start here. Let's talk a little broad about the bigger why, right? So we want to really understand, from a strategic perspective, like what we're hoping to accomplish during the time that we spend here today, because this is valuable time. Time is always valuable. And especially in this context with the Tory Burch Foundation and everything and all the effort that's put into supporting small businesses, having successful small businesses is the overall common denominator across all of these different webinars, right? Over the weeks, over the months, it's all really the main goal. So a couple of stats that I want us to take a look at initially as we jump in. The first one being that 20% of small businesses fail within the first year. That's a lot, right? And then we move forward a little bit in time, and then we see that 50% of small businesses do not survive beyond the first 5 years. And when we look at why that is, there are a couple of reasons for those failures, and 3 things really stand out. One being the lack of cash flow, right? So running into any types of cash flow issues ends up being a problem for small business owners. The second one is the overall lack of demand for the product or the service that is being offered. So whatever that offering is, if there's not a market for that, or users or customers are not looking for it, that's going to cause some issues. And then the last thing is limited competitive research. So when you're in business, you really want to understand exactly what space you're playing in and how does that differentiate you from your other competitors out there. So keeping these 3 things in mind, we'll circle back to them after, As we go through this presentation, I really want to help us come out of here with some tactical ways that we can address these issues and really fill in some of those gaps. So for each of you, as you're spending the time here again today, I hope that it inspires you and it inspires the success of your business. So let's start with defining that minimum viable product. Now, some of you may have heard about a minimum viable product before. Maybe the phrase is new to you. So what exactly is it? If we wanted a simple definition, we can think of a minimum viable product as that product or offering that has just enough features to be usable by your early customers, who are going to help you validate your idea, and they provide feedback that can help you with your future product development and product enhancements, right? So let's dive into that a little bit and exactly what that means. Some of the key characteristics of an MVP are really honing in on those essential features. So you're not building everything, you're not building all the bells and whistles, you're really trying to focus on the ones that your customers truly are interested in. And specifically for the purposes of testing, these are the ones that are really going to move the needle in terms of you knowing what it is that you need to deliver to the market. Secondly, is having flexible options. There are multiple different ways of what an MVP can look like and different types of prototypes, and we'll go through some of those examples later on, but it's very flexible. Again, it allows you to make that decision based on where you are in your business and what it is that's going to be best for you. And especially when it comes down to the finances around that, you're going to be able to make the best decision. So you're not tied into it having to be one certain way. The next point is that you want to deliver, again, enough value so that a customer is enticed to use it or potentially buy it. And a key distinction here, that usability and being able to validate that idea, that is really the meat of your MVP. That's the most important thing. Your feedback is the first priority. However, if a customer is incentivized enough, they may be willing to pay, right? So depending on how much you spend, you may be able to make a small profit on your MVP. But again, that is not the priority. The main thing is really about getting that feedback. And then lastly, continuing on speaking about feedback, when you have that information, when you know what's working, what's not working, what the customer really needs, as opposed to what you thought they need, then you're able to use that insight to make some decisions. Because the big thing around products, the big things around an offering is to really have that product market fit. You want to be able to say and match what it is that you're delivering to solve a problem to what the market actually needs. And so going through this exercise with an MVP will allow you to really get that fit and be able to wiggle things and change and make tweaks and iterate over time based on the information that you learn. So moving right along here, what are the benefits of an MVP? Now, some of these we've already touched on a little bit. Eric Ries, who wrote the book Lean Startup and really was the one who started socializing this idea of an MVP, he defined it as, an MVP is a version of a new product which allows a team to collect the maximum amount of validated learnings about customers with the least effort. So again, it really helps define the minimum set of the product's core functionalities that are necessary for you to engage your users early and really start that learning feedback loop. Because this is something that is continuous, right? Learning about your customer and getting that information and that feedback loop, that is continuous. That's not something that stops once you deliver your MVP, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So this, as an entrepreneur, as a founder, as a small business owner, this is something that will help you really get the information that you need, get it quickly and early. So those are some of the points I have laid out here. This allows you to test early, and it allows you to test quickly, right? And as you have your product out there in front of your users and they're engaging with it, they're interacting with it, you're seeing how they're using it, you're observing them, they're able to provide you really, really important data and feedback, which allow you to then make informed decisions as you move forward. And again, that market validation, that's important. The limited budget and resources. So I think one of the big misconceptions that people have around a business and starting is, you jump all in, there are all these different expenses, people get really excited, they love their idea, they love their service, they love their product. Then you start going to, you get the office, you get the stationery, you get your business name on things, and all of those things cost money, right? All of those things, that's money, and that budget is taking away from what you could be investing back into the product. So the goal here with an MVP is to really help you realize that you don't have to start by spending a ton of money to be able to build a product or to build a service or build some kind of an offering. You can really start small. And in some cases, spending little to no money, depending on how you choose to do it, and then get that information. And over time, then you can invest more money. And as I mentioned before, again, the goal here is really about getting the feedback. But if you're able to get the customer to be enticed enough that they value what you're offering and they're willing to buy it, you may be able to end up with some small profit. And again, depending on how your margin is and your original startup costs, it may not take a lot for you to really see a profit even early in this stage. And then I think lastly, to call out is really the fact that at this point, you're going to be getting insights from your users, your target market, and that information is going to tell you what to do. It's going to tell you, yes, continue on with this product or offering. It's going to tell you, continue on, but maybe you need to make some changes and maybe you need to tweak some things. Or it may tell you, this is just not an idea that is landing in the way that you would like it to, ideally, for your customers. And it's not completely solving the issues that they have and the problems that they need solved. So you may need to go back to the drawing board. But either way, valuable information again, so that you really can hone in and achieve that product market fit, which will help you improve the success of your business overall. So next, we want to talk a little bit about how do you get from point A to building up your MVP. And this is a process that you can use design thinking to do. What exactly is design thinking? It is a philosophy and an ideology, and it also comes along with a process and a set of tools that help you solve complex problems using a user-centric focus. So design thinking was something that, was really a process that designers used and an approach that they used to do their work. And many companies, a lot of companies who are in the tech space, who are looking to introduce a lot of innovative products to customers, they use design thinking to solve problems, which are often called, wicked problems. And essentially what it does, like the key aspect of it, because there are different ways of creative problem solving and different ways to solve problems. This really focuses on your human-centered aspect, right? So you need to know exactly who it is that you're designing for, right? You need to know who those customers are. You need to really understand their needs. Like, what are some of the problems that they're facing today that's causing friction in their day-to-day that you can come up with a solution for? And the last piece is really, this is really the matchmaking, right? So as you come up with some innovative ideas and solutions, you want to tie that back to the original needs and problems that your users have. So there are 5 main phases that walk you through this process. As you can see here, being able to empathize with the user, being able to define the actual problem, ideating, prototyping, and then lastly, testing. So these are the 5 phases. However, one thing to note is that this process is very flexible. The exact steps are what they are, but how you kind of go through that process and what you do within, for example, the tools you use, those things are all very flexible. And another thing to note as well is that the process is very iterative, right? It's not linear as it's laid out here. You may get through ideating and prototyping and testing and learn some new information, which makes you realize you need to go back to defining your problem, or you may need to go back to the first phase and really just, really understand what it is that the customers need from your product. So we'll start with the very first phase here where, what you're really focused on is around understanding your users and understanding the problems that they face. And this is where you're getting to know the people that you're looking to design an offering for. So what does that mean? This is where you are observing them, you are engaging with them, you are really honing in on the emotional and psychological aspects of how they interact and how they go about their day-to-day, so that you're able to, gather all that information. And there are many ways to do this, right? So one of the key things is about asking a lot of questions. And even when you think you get an answer, you ask why, and you continue to ask why again. You really need to focus on just drilling deeper so that you really get a good sense of people. Because one of the interesting things about, customer behavior is that the way people act, the way they make purchases, it seems like it's a logical thing, but in many cases it's not. It's a lot about human psychology and human behavior that needs to be studied to understand them. So for one example, Clay Christensen, who is really thought of as someone who's spent a lot of time, done a lot of research on innovation, one of the things he introduced is this idea of milkshake marketing. There was a restaurant, a fast food restaurant, that they just saw a huge rise in the sale of milkshakes, and this all happened in the morning. And it was just very interesting. Why would people buy milkshakes early in the morning? This is something you'd probably assume they would do, middle of the day, in the afternoon, when it's hot outside and they're looking to have a drink to cool down. But, one of the things that they learned in the research is that 40% of the sales that happen usually happen at the beginning of the day. So after learning that, they went back to the restaurant just to understand, okay, why is that? And in interviewing people, they learned some really interesting things. One was that, a lot of these people had a long commute in the morning. So they bought the milkshake because it's something that they can drink during their journey, right? And they knew that around, by the time they got to work around like mid-morning, they would be hungry, but it's not exactly lunchtime, right? And when they arrive, instead of having to run back out to get a snack or something, a milkshake and drinking that along the way would basically suffice that hunger that they knew would be coming. The second thing about that is they were driving, they're in traffic. So they really only had at most, one available hand to drink something along the way. And so a milkshake was easy, right? You just have to grab it, you use the straw, you can keep your other hand on the steering wheel, and that allowed them to drink the milkshake. And the third point is it's something to do, right? They're in traffic. Traffic may be slow. You're stopping and going. This is just something to do to help pass the time. So when you think of why people eat, why people drink, they're hungry, they're thirsty, like this was not exactly that. This was something that, people did because it basically did a job for them. And that's one of the things, we think about it in product is what exactly is the job that needs to be done? And what is it that the customer is trying to achieve? Because on the surface, it may not be what you think it is. And this is why this phase is really important, because it gets you to fully understand by observation, not always just by asking, because the answer you get may not tell you exactly why. It's observing and probing to really get to the bottom of this. So some of the questions that you want to make sure you're asking in this phase is, again, who am I making this product or offering for? What are the problems they have? What needs do they need to have solved? And what do they do, right? So what exactly are those jobs that they need to accomplish? What are those tasks? And in that process, what is easy for them? What is, brings them joy? What causes them pain and friction that needs to be solved and can be improved? And a couple of things that you'd want to make sure that you avoid here is skipping the empathy phase, right? You want to make sure you really spend time on this so that you fully understand exactly what it is that you need to solve for. Another thing is to make assumptions. This is why you're doing the research, so that you can get the facts and the data. You don't want to think you know, because what you think you know may not be what it is. And so this is why being able to rely on the adequate research here is really important. And there are a couple of tools that I've outlined, because again, like I said, there are many different ways, and this list is not in any way exhaustive, but it gives you a list of options. And based on what it is that you need to do and how you need to do it, you can have interviews, you can have focus groups, you can follow people around and kind of shadow them. You can work on different empathy maps, or you can even do a customer journey map. So all of those are different tools. Again, definitely worth a deep dive to deeply understand what each means and which one would make the most sense for your situation. So next is the define phase. So define is, once you take everything that you've done in the first step and you feel like you have an understanding of your end users, you want to then distill that information. So this is really around synthesizing that data, drawing out the key insights, and being able to create a problem statement, because this is what you're going to use to then solve the problem. So what you want to do in this phase is just really focus in on those insights. What are those key nuggets and things that you've learned? What did you come across as a problem? And as you talk to more people, did you see that it's a common problem, right? So it's something pervasive that continues to be ongoing. Those are the things you want to really draw out and use to your benefit. So again, these are the common problems, the different challenges, all of those observations that seems to suggest patterns, different themes, relationships across them, different recurrences, so that you can use that information. So again, going back to the milkshake story that I shared, if you look at the different themes that may come out, one of the challenges that people may have as they are drinking their milkshake while driving, because the straw, like let's say the straw isn't wide enough, right? That may pose a challenge. When you're drinking a milkshake and you're kind of getting to the bottom of it, it's a little clumpy. So that may be something that, as they're doing it, it causes friction for them. So maybe there's an opportunity there to make a change and make some improvements. So some of the questions you want to ask in this phase are, what exactly are the user's needs? And what jobs do they need to get done? What is the right problem to solve? Because you are going to come across a lot of different problems, but you want to keep in mind and really focus in on the key ones that are going to really make a difference in their experience. And another thing here as well is, as you're focused on your users, you also want to get a lay of the land and the landscape. So that may be where you take a look at your competitors. Are there other products out there that are doing something similar, right? Are other products that are addressing exactly what it is that the customer needs and addressing the jobs that need to be done? So that's definitely something to take a look at. And in the image here on the right, you can see just the flow of the different jobs that a customer may need. But depending on an existing product that may be out there, it may only be hitting a number of those jobs, but not the entire flow of the job. So that may be an opportunity for you, right? If you're able to solve a problem for the customer that really goes through their entire journey and covers all the jobs that they need to have done, that may be a great value proposition for them, because then they don't have to, use one product for a number of the jobs and then use a different product. So you bring a lot of consistency, and your offering is across a consistent platform, which makes it a lot easier for a user. So some of the tools here, personas, right? Which is where you really focus in on a representative person of your target market. You can also do user journeys. You can do role objectives, again, which is something that can be tied to the jobs that need to be done and that need to happen. And also really get into the detail of the jobs to be done and defining that. And some of the things that you want to avoid in this phase is not going too broad, but also not going too too narrow with your focus. Because what happens in that case, you may end up missing some opportunities, or what you're doing may be a little confusing and convoluted. So you really want to just kind of focus in on, again, in an example with the problem, not trying to solve all the problems, but really focusing on key ones. And then the last point is around, not framing the problem in a user-centric way. Again, this is going to be the meat of this whole process with design thinking. It's really to hone in on what it is that the user wants. So that needs to be front and center at all times. So the next phase is around ideating. And this is a phase that I love, because it is free, it is fun. This is where you really get creative, right? So you take everything that you've learned in your prior 2 steps, and this is where you come up with ideas for your solution. So you are not limiting yourself at this phase at all. And no idea is a bad idea. It's really a numbers game. Like I've heard a lot of people say, I'm not creative and I can't do creative things. I'm a left brain person. This is really creativity and creative problem solving. It's really about being open being free, thinking grand and bold, ambitious, just thinking really big ideas and putting them all down. Like when you really start this, no idea is a bad idea. It's really about getting them down, and then you can work through the process of prioritizing, and looking at it in different ways and seeing which ones actually make sense and having a process for that, as opposed to just throwing them out without really going through and vetting them correctly. So in this phase, there are really two steps, I would say. One is the process of generating those ideas, which is what you want to do up front. And then it is deciding on the ideas. So again, you're coming up with potential options and matches of your product and service and offering options that then tie back to the insights you learn about the problems that your customers have and the needs that they have to be solved. So this can look and take on a variety of shape. Like you've probably seen pictures of workshops or even been in them in brainstorming sessions where you see Post-it notes everywhere, lots of color. People are coming up with all these different ideas. And this is an example of what this can look like. And it can be a solo exercise. It can be something you do with others. You can do it virtually. You can do it in person in a room. You can do it asynchronously. So there are just many different ways that you do that. And if we go back again to our example of the milkshake story, what is an idea or a potential solution, right? So we mentioned people just having a hard time getting the rest of their milkshake out of the straw once they're at the bottom of the milkshake and they're almost done. Well, maybe an idea here is just a wider straw, right? Because it makes it a little easier for them. It's something that solves this specific problem, right? And it's a way that you can enhance your milkshake experience. You can enhance your product basically by having listened to what you heard and addressing that specific problem. So questions you want to ask in this phase are, what are the options for the solution? And again, thinking really big, really bold. Even if you think it's impossible at this phase, you still put it down and you work through your process. And you also make sure that, you're challenging any assumptions, right? You don't want to just think, or you have a point of view. You want to just make sure it's something that's data driven and ties back to the data that you have. A couple of things to avoid. Again, one is just not thinking outside of the box. You want to make sure you're thinking really bold, you're digging really deep, and you're not discounting ideas before you actually fully vet them. And then the second point is not making judgment. It's really hard to just, again, like I said, some people just have blockers around being creative. It's really important that you're not judging yourself, right? You're allowing the process and the tools that you have available to you to give you data points that say yes or no specific to an idea, but you're not just making that decision up front. So lots of different tools that are available in this phase, brainstorming, doing collaborative workshops, using divergent thinking, prioritizing. You can do a dot voting exercise where, let's say you have all your ideas down, you give everyone like 3 sticky notes, for example, and for each idea, they can decide to put a sticky note down or not. And so it's a way to kind of, allow folks to not have just maybe one strong opinion in the room, decide what that product is going to be, but it's a voting system, but it's not unlimited voting. People really have to prioritize their top 3. And at the end of the day, whichever idea comes out with the highest number of votes, that can be the idea you move forward with. So now the next phase is around prototyping. And really this gets us down, a little bit into the meat of that MVP. This is where you focus on which ideas you're going to develop. Again, so think of, ideas and brainstorming as a funnel. You start really, really large up top with all your different ideas. And as you work your way down, you prioritize, you look at what's feasible, what's possible based on the funding you have. You basically, bring those ideas down. So now when you get to this phase and you have the options of building a solution, you're going to be looking at a few ideas. And the goal here is to turn those ideas into a tangible product with a rough model or sketch and use that to have your customers have something to test, right? So you want to turn your ideas into something that is simple, that is testable, and there are different ways that you can accomplish that. Now, as a reminder, again, this is not something that is fully developed. If it's some kind of software, it's not something that needs to be fully coded, and it does not need to be, your full out final product. Again, this is something that stimulates that experience for your customer so they can interact with it. They can see how it flows, and whether it's digitally or physically, they can go through that experience of how they would use it and provide you with that information. And that information is going to be really valuable because that's what you're going to use to say, okay, I'm going to reject this idea. I'm going to, go back and do some reconstruction, or I'm going to accept it to move forward. So questions you want to ask here are, how quickly can you demonstrate a solution? Again, remember when we defined your MVP up front, it's something that you want to be able to test quickly. So this is really, really important. Your prototyping process should not take extremely long. Since you're not delivering all your features, a key question here is, which features are you going to prioritize? Again, these are going to be the ones that are truly needed by your customer to test. And you're also going to need to be able to set aside which features are not needed right now, and you can exclude those. So a few things to avoid with this step. You want to avoid making it too complex, right? One, that's going to slow you down. It's going to make the process convoluted. It's not going to allow you to really hone in on your feature and your service of exactly what it is that you need to test. And another risk here that you want to avoid is spending too much money and time. And a prototype does not need to take long at all. They're like really, really quick ways to do that. And you can see some of these examples here, but even something as bare bone as drawing a sketch on a paper can be a starting point, right? So you can have sketches, you can have storyboards that tell you kind of how the flow is with some captions below to walk through the experience. You have, different wireframes and mock-ups, and all the way up through a more detailed MVP. So let's get into that a little bit and talk about, some of the options in here. When you think about the range of what you can have with prototypes, you can go from something that is low fidelity. So if you look on the left, all the way to something that is higher fidelity. And what low fidelity means, it's something that's a little more basic. It's something that you would expect to be incomplete. It really only incorporates a few of those features. And, like I mentioned, and you can see here, some of those examples are going to be your sketches, your storyboard. And the benefits of those are that they are quick, they are cheap. You can change them and iterate on them very quickly, but it allows you to kind of see the full picture of what it is that you're developing with minimal effort. And most importantly, too, is that it's not resource intensive, right? So you can do something like this without any extensive experience or level. Again, a pencil and a paper does not take much. Any of us can pick that up and do that. So starting wherever you are, right? The important thing is to have something out there, to have that feedback. You can start with something that's low fidelity and work your way up. And as we move, to the right, this brings us over to options that are higher fidelity. When you think of something that's high fidelity, this is something that looks a lot closer to the end result. Again, it doesn't have to have all of the features at this point because that's not the purpose of your MVP. But the benefits of having something that's higher fidelity is that it's a lot more engaging to the user because it brings them closer to that final experience. And it's something that based on the UI, the user interface, they can navigate it on their own, right? So you don't have to sit there with them to tell them, okay, click here and do this step and, look for this icon. They can intuitively do that on their own. And the way that they navigate that may be very different from how you would navigate it, but it's a great learning opportunity to see how your product will land with users, how they will perceive it, and what may be some opportunities to tweak it so that it is a more seamless and easy experience for them. And one of the other things about something that's a little higher fidelity is when you think about just your overall stakeholders, right, who may be involved. Like maybe you're looking to pitch your idea to someone who may invest in your business. This gets them closer to that. So they're able to see the product, some of the questions that they may have. They can interact with it so that they can, make some of those decisions that they would have and answer some of the questions that they may have. So, when you think about the different types that we have here, sketches, again, this is something where you're really focused in on a basic drawing just to get the product idea out there. And if you think, I love art. If you think about drawing, right, you may sketch your drawing with a pencil, maybe on a canvas or on paper, before you actually put paint out there. Think about paint as your investment. Paint is expensive. Oil paint is especially expensive. Instead of doing that first, you might just do that with pencil, just so you can kind of see how, the different shapes or trees or whatever it is, the landscape that you're painting, you can get a feel for how that would look, but still have a choice to make some changes, erase some things, and move things around as you have it laid out. Wireframes, the real focus for wireframes is around getting the content, the structure, and the functionality laid out. And this is something, if you think about, you need to build a house, for example, and you're working with an architect, and the architect gives the contractor just a basic kind of blueprint of what the house can look like. This is what a wireframe is. It's not something super, super detailed, but structurally, it will tell you, how things are going to lay out so you can see from a functional perspective how it would work. And so building on that wireframe, this is where a mockup comes in. Now, what a mockup does, it layers in, that surface layer that communicates to the end users what, from a visual perspective, that will look like. So this is where you bring in your colors, your images, your typography, all of those things to help bring that wireframe to life with color, make it vivid, make it rich, so that you can see exactly what that's going to look like. So that may be, some kind of like workable sample of your final product. It may be some kind of a demo that you can use to really kind of bring that to life. And then, your prototype here, it's really about the usability. That's a key thing here. Just getting the concept, but the usability is the key thing. And so that you can interact with it and essentially have that serve as a sample of that final product. And, as an extension of that, this is where your MVP really comes in as your core features, your core functionality. Again, it might be just a subset of your overall features that you're maybe looking to deliver, but this is what allows you, to deliver that experience to the users for the core things that you want to test at this phase to make decisions to go forward. And there are other ways, and this is not an exhaustive list. There are other things you can do. There are demo videos. The Dropbox video, for example, has been a popular one. Before you even launch the product, giving people a sense of what is going to come. A video can be really helpful for that. If you're offering something like an online course or some kind of a digital product, a landing page may be really helpful for that. Just a one page that really goes through and explains, what it is that you'll be delivering. What are they going to get? How do you sign up? Things like that, using those keywords, describing the value proposition, describing the features that allow people to get a sense of the experience. And then lastly, once you have your MVP out there, this is really about getting feedback and testing, right? So this is what it's all about. This is about having those users who you talk to in the very first phase, right? Going back to them, keeping them involved in the process and saying, here's what I've built so far. How does it feel? How does it look? Does it satisfy your need? And this, again, is going to give you all that information that you need to then make decisions about investments and any additional resources that you may want to spend going forward. So the questions you want to ask here are around, does the solution solve your problem, right? Is this what you're looking for? Does it provide value to you? Is it something that's useful? Are you able to use it? Is it something that's desirable? Is it efficient? Is it effective? And you also want to see how this compares to, again, your competitor, right? So you also want to understand from a competitive perspective what or how your product or offering stacks up. So a couple of things you want to avoid in this phase, again, you're getting data, you're getting feedback. You want to make sure you maximize that information. So it's important to pivot, right? And if you're unable to do that, that will obviously, limit some opportunities. And again, pivoting may mean kind of going back and rebuilding. So you don't want to have, funding be a reason why you can't go back because you spend everything on the first iteration of the product, right? So that's why it's important to start light. That way, once you get feedback, you can make iterations. Another thing is once you get that feedback, it's to make it actionable and actually take action on that feedback, right? So you want to make sure you are listening to the feedback, you're incorporating, you're building it back into the process, so that you can really just maximize all of the effort and all of the input that you're getting. And so some of the tools to be able to do this, many of these exist. There's concept testing, there's A/B testing where you have an A and a B version of your product and you ask your customers to give you feedback on each one to see which one's going to resonate best with them. There is first click testing, there's tree testing, lots of different options here with the customer so that you can get that feedback. So that takes us through the 5 phases of design thinking that let you end up with your MVP, right? So some of the things that we want to avoid and what cause MVPs to fail. So similar to some of the issues we talked about up front, generally for small businesses, some of these also appear here as well from an MVP perspective, right? So around product, the market, and your customer. You want to make sure you communicate to your customer from a product perspective. And what that means is for the product, you are communicating to them about what it is that you're solving for them, right? The benefits that you'll provide and the needs that you're solving. It is not about the product itself because that can take different shapes. And you want to make sure that you're not getting attached to your solution. You're really honing in on loving that problem and being able to provide a solution around that. From a market perspective, not doing competitive analysis, like that's something that can really limit the success of an MVP because this will tell you how you might need to tweak your own solution, your own product, right? And again, as you're learning and getting information and feedback, you want to be flexible to tweak your business model. So whether that means, tweaking pricing, tweaking the channels that you deliver in, your distribution, all those things, these are all things you want to make sure you're taking back. And then from a customer perspective, just honing in on your target market, right? Making sure that you are focusing on the right target to deliver this for. And at an MVP stage, you don't need to be solving for everyone. You really want to just hone in on specifically that target market, building around that persona, building around those who really have those needs and problems that you've identified. And that is really your focus. And over time, you can branch out and build from there. And, having a push strategy here instead of a pull strategy, why you want to have a pull strategy is because you're using the information that the users are giving you and they're telling you what to build. If you are listening, you will build the right things for them as opposed to coming up with this grand idea and putting it out there and wondering why no one is buying the product and no one's buying the offering. Instead of pushing, you want to pull that information that's already out there, that's readily available to you, and use that to your benefit to make sure that your product, your offering is something that is valuable, that is, going to help the customer. And so, when we move beyond an MVP, you deliver your MVP, you get information, it's not over. This is really the early stages, but it's an exciting time because now you have data to make decisions around, right? So whether you need to spend more funding, you will know where and how to do that now, right? And you will have something in hand that you can talk to investors about and have that conversation so that you can get their support for funding. Based on what you're hearing, you can enhance the product with more features. These are all going to be based on the feedback, right? What do I need to prioritize to come next? You can listen to the users and see what they need and give them a sense of those features up front and let that information guide you. Same thing from the overall experience. Based on how someone is using your product, navigating through your website or using your app, you may learn that how you thought it was going to work is going to be very, very different. So, based on that, you can then, go back to your designers and enhance that user experience and enhance that user interface for them. And like we mentioned before, pricing and making a profit is not the goal for your MVP, but now that you have additional information, then you can take that to move forward. You can really hone in on your pricing, your packaging, like what is the ideal price point? Because at that point, as you move forward, the goal is going to be to make a profit, right? You're in business. So that becomes important. And then you can also think about your broader market. So as you grow a business, you're looking to scale. And in addition to the original target market that you started with, now you want to shift focus to other customers who may be interested in some of the offerings that you're going to look to deliver. So, when I think about some of the key takeaways here, right? This process, talking through what it takes to define an MVP and deliver an MVP and some of the tactical things around that, it is about instilling confidence in your process. You don't want to wing it. You want to be able to use data that's out there, that's available to you, to really validate as you're going, keeping your customers super close to you, talking to them, getting, hearing from them how your build is resonating with them. Is it landing with them well? And use that information to really secure your product market fit. The next thing is about just increasing your overall chances of success. So we talked about some of those reasons businesses failed. At the very top of this, we want to make sure we address all those things as we've laid out here, right? To make sure that we increase those chances using data and insights. We love our products, we love our services, but you're not the end customer. It is about the users. It is about what they need. So using that information to define what it is that you're going to build and make those changes, as opposed to thinking you have those ideas. So here, data and insights, those things are your friend. Preserving your funding. Again, this is something that you want to use for scaling. You want to use for other purposes. You want to use for marketing, for promotion, for your distribution channels, for building a team, not just for your MVP, again, which can be something super light just to get the concept and the idea out there. And overall, just tackling the statistics, right? So we want to make sure we are closing the gap in terms of why small businesses fail. We want to make sure that we provide the tools, the information, the resources so that small businesses can be successful. So I think overall, if we can look at what we've talked about, today, if we can holistically, really hone in on solving some of those things and then using some of these tools and processes and methods around design thinking to get to an MVP, again, keeping it light, focused on feedback. Hopefully this information has been really helpful for you to be able to do that and, just improve the success and overall, the overall just feedback and the market reach for your product and for your offering. So I will pause there. I know we're gonna wanted to save some time at the end for questions. So we are gonna jump right into that right now.
Great. Thank you so much for your presentation. We do have a lot of questions, so I'm gonna get going on those. So just to be super clear, can these same steps, the same MVP formula be applied to service-based businesses?
Absolutely, right. So I've definitely mentioned product, but I mentioned offering and I mentioned service because this process can be the same, right? You can use this. Let's say you have a service-based business where you're a coach or you're a consultant, or maybe you have digital products that you're selling. You can have a landing page, you can have a website, but you don't need to go out front initially with, 7 different courses. That's a lot of work. It's a lot of time to build all those, to make it right, to make it insightful for folks. So instead of taking all that time, you might want to start with like a core offering. And it's the same concept here. Same thing as like one product, core offering, right? Maybe it's a mastermind class or something. But you start there and you see what that feedback is and you see what's needed. And then you can go beyond that and create additional ones.
Great. Thank you for that. Now we had April ask about the customer journey and customer discovery. Can you say a little bit more about how those two concepts are connected?
Yeah. So the customer discovery, this is something that initially happens up front. Like this is something where, again, it's the understanding the who, understanding what they need, understanding the pain points, what's easy for them today, what's challenging for them today. Also just understanding the human, what motivates them, and really painting that rich picture of that person. When they on weekends, what do they like to do? Are they the type to get up early and go get a coffee? Do they like to jog? Are they a Netflix person? Really honing in on that. And that customer journey is, as you get all that information, you kind of map it out, right? So you are taking basically a snapshot into their life to say, here is the flow of the things that they do, and you kind of lay out the tasks. And task number 1 and task number 7, those are two where they have pain points. Those are some friction areas, but some of the other tasks, like it's all smiley faces, they're fine with those. So that's really how you kind of combine the two together. Discovery is, it happens up front, but again, to do this well, you need to constantly be listening and do this in an ongoing way. And that snapshot of the customer journey will help you kind of see that maybe in like a one-pager. And you can see, exactly where each of those transaction points are and those touch points are for the user, and how it's working for them, because that will tell you where to hone in, what you need to solve for, where to focus.
So that's great. And then to kind of piggyback off of that, let's say a founder really wants to have those end users be incorporated into the design phase. How can you make sure that they have a seat at the table?
That's a great question. So I always, in practice, I love to keep your users close. They are your biggest advocates. When you're starting, it's not a numbers game in terms of your users. It's about getting folks who are really, really passionate about what you're doing and absolutely see a need. And those are the ones, those are your quote unquote early adopters. They're the ones who are going to tell a friend, they're going to tell their cousin, right? They're the ones who are going to be doing that marketing for you up front. So when you have the conversation to say, hey, I have this idea, I'm thinking about this product, I'm thinking about this service that I want to deliver. When you talk to them, they're investing their time. You want to pay it back to them and show that, okay, what I heard, I am listening to you and I'm taking something. Like, people love to feel included. People love to be involved, right? And that's a way that you can make sure you're, not just asking for their time and using it selfishly, and then you go and, you build and then you never turn back. You want to let them keep up to date with what's going on. So whether that's like a light touch, like, hey, I'm kind of building this feature, but making sure that you put it in front of them, right? Or set up time and have them jump on a call, jump on a Zoom, and have them give you feedback. So it's lockstep. You want to keep them really, really close in your process, so that, because they are the ones who are going to be giving you that information as you move forward.
Yes, customers are so important, and I think that reminder is so key for all of us. Okay, so moving on, and I'm going to try to get through as many questions as we can. I know we're a little bit tight on time. Are some products just too complicated for an MVP, something like an app?
That's an excellent question. There are certain things that you would not want to make for an MVP. For example, a plane. Right? There are things where, there are reasons why you just don't want to kind of sketch something out, like for safety reasons, right? So if your product is something along those lines, you have safety, you have certain risks, there are just some complications where you're not going to kind of get the meat of what that product is and like the core features in something like a sketch, or even some kind of wireframe, or something that you build digitally, or an app. So it really depends on the nature of that product. Certainly, there are lots of things that will lend themselves to this process. But again, if it's like regulatory or something where there's safety issues, yeah, that's probably something that you probably would have to just take that longer route. And some of those things will require more R&D, more investments up front.
Yes, yes. Safety and regulations are key.
Right.
Don't want anybody on here today to get sued. So thank you for that reminder. And so we've talked a lot about brand new businesses or founders who maybe haven't launched yet. But for businesses who are already established, can they use this model when they're launching new products? And how do they do that without disappointing their existing customers who really who have a certain expectation about quality?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So the process can still work. When you're a more established business, there's still an opportunity to reinvent, right? To get to new markets, to just if you think about digital transformation that's happening all over, it takes different flavors. And sometimes that means new products, new services, right? You want to compete with new competitors out there, right? So if you might be a big existing company, but you have a startup that's coming up and now they're your competitor where traditionally they haven't been the case, you can still take the same process. And, your new product may just mean focusing on a new subset of customers. So it may just be a new market that you're exploiting, right? So you think about white space. Even if you're an existing company or existing business, you may still just have like a specific market, but maybe there's a new market out there for you. Maybe it is an international market. Maybe it's, an area of the country that you don't have a presence in. So there are lots of different ways that you can continue to exploit and find those spaces. And yes, you can use this same process to help you do that while you're running your existing business and you're still servicing your existing products.
That's great. And then, let's see, I'm trying to pick through this because we really only have time for one more question. Okay, is a sampling strategy or something like a trial offer a good way to approach market research, or is it better to save that or use that as more of a customer acquisition tool?
Yeah, you can definitely do that. Again, you may have a component of this test that has pricing involved, or you can save that for later, right? And so if you have something that's out there with some reasonable price points, and let's say it's an opportunity where people can sign up in advance of like the actual launch date, that will be an indicator that will tell you people are willing to pay. And even if it's a trial offer, it's the same thing. That information will give you data. It will tell you, okay, yes, these people are willing to pay for it, and based on that, the number of people, and even if it's one or two or three, it's still information. It means it's still valuable to someone, and that's the important thing to take away, right? Because you want to make sure your product, your service, your offering, it is valuable, meaning that someone is willing to pay. And if you do have a price associated early on, that really helps you validate that.
That's great. Thank you so much.